The mining outpost on Kepler-442c was the kind of place most people forgot existed. 3 years had passed since Commander Kim Dae-ho and his team first set foot on this dusty, orange-colored planet. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work. Every day, his crew of 47 civilians and 12 soldiers would head down into the deep mines. Pulling precious metals from the planet's belly, Dae-ho liked the quiet life out here. No politicians breathing down his neck, no corporate executives, demanding impossible deadlines. Just him, his people, and the endless task of feeding Earth's hunger for rare minerals. The planet had 2 small moons that cast strange shadows across the rocky landscape. The sunsets painted the sky in colors that no Earth artist could ever capture. Lee Min-ho, the communications officer, spent most of his time monitoring space. Traffic, not that there was much to monitor. Maybe once a month, a cargo ship would swing by to pick up their shipment and drop off supplies. The rest of the time, they might as well have been the only humans in the galaxy. The civilians had built a small community around the mining operation. Park So-young ran the medical bay, treating everything from mining accidents to homesickness. Kim Hae-jin managed the food production in their hydroponic gardens, somehow making vegetables taste good even when they were grown in artificial soil. Choi Woo-bin kept their equipment running, which was no small task on a planet where dust got into everything. The military personnel were there mostly for show. Pirates rarely bothered with mining operations this far from the main trade routes. The soldiers spent their time training, maintaining their weapons, and trying not to die of boredom. Sergeant Yoon Tae-yong had started a small betting pool on how many days would pass before they saw another human face from outside their group. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when the long-range sensors started screaming. Lee Min-ho stared at his screen, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't seeing things. 30 contacts, all moving in formation, all heading straight for Kepler-442c. The computer identified them as Vortani warships, each one big enough to level a city. Commander Min-ho called out, his voice cracking slightly. "We've got company." Dae-ho rushed to the communications room, coffee mug still in hand. When he saw the display, the mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. 30 ships. They had maybe 6 hours before those ships reached orbit. The Vortani Empire had never shown any interest in their little mining operation. Why would they? There were richer worlds, more strategic locations, better targets for conquest. But here, they were a full battle fleet bearing down on a mining outpost that most maps didn't even bother to label. Dae-ho felt his stomach drop as the reality hit him. His people weren't soldiers. They were miners, engineers, farmers, and medics. They had some weapons, some basic defenses, but nothing that could stand up to a Vortani battle fleet. 6 hours to prepare for war. Admiral Zikmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small human settlement grow larger on the main screen. His forearms crossed in satisfaction as he counted the pathetic structures below. A few mining buildings, some storage facilities, and what looked like living quarters. This would be over before lunch. The Vortani had been conquering worlds for over 2 centuries. Their plasma cannons could melt through the strongest armor, and their shield technology made them nearly invulnerable to primitive weapons. Zikmar had personally overseen the destruction of 43 different species. Humans would just be number 44. Send the standard message, he ordered his communications officer in their clicking, chittering language. The Vortani didn't believe in long negotiations. Why waste time talking when superior firepower could solve everything? Down on the planet's surface, Kim Dae-ho gathered his senior staff in the command center. The message came through crystal clear, translated by their computers into simple terms. Surrender now or die. Park So-young, the medical officer, looked. Pale Commander, we can't fight 30 warships with mining equipment. Maybe we can negotiate, suggested Lee Min-ho. Tell them we're just miners. We're not a military threat. But Dae-ho was already thinking differently. He'd studied military history in his younger days, back when he dreamed of being a career soldier instead of a mining supervisor. He remembered reading about Afghanistan, Vietnam, and countless other places where small forces had frustrated much larger armies. Open a channel, he told Min-ho. The response that came back from the planet surprised Admiral Zikmer. Instead of begging for mercy or trying to bargain, the human commander said just 4 words: "Come and take it." Zickmer's translator had to run the phrase through its database twice. The meaning was clear, but the attitude was baffling. These humans had to know they were outgunned. His ships carried enough firepower to glass the entire mining site 10 times over. "Typical human stupidity," he muttered to his second-in-command. "They probably think their primitive weapons can hurt us." What Admiral Zickmer didn't understand was that humans had been fighting impossible odds for thousands of years. When the Persian Empire sent millions of soldiers to crush a few hundred Spartans at Thermopylae, when the British Empire tried to hold on to America with conventional tactics, when massive armies found themselves bleeding in the mountains of Afghanistan, the same pattern repeated over and over. The Vortani had never faced an enemy that refused to play by the rules of conventional warfare. They expected their enemies to line up in neat formations, to fight ship-to-ship battles in space, to surrender when the odds became impossible. Deho wasn't planning to do any of those things. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "they're moving into bombardment positions." "Let them come," Deho replied, watching the alien ships arrange themselves in orbit. "Oh, wait. We've got 6 hours of preparation, and they have no idea what they're walking into." The Vortani admiral was about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn survivors. The first plasma bolt hit the main administration building at exactly 6:47 a.m. local time. Kim Dae-ho watched from deep underground as the structure he'd called home for 3 years simply vanished in a ball of superheated gas. The entire facility shook like an earthquake was tearing it apart. "That's our cue," he whispered into his communication device. "Phase 1 complete. All teams confirm positions." One by one, his people checked in from their hiding spots. Past 6 hours had been a frenzy of activity that would have impressed any military engineer. While the Vortani ships had been moving into position, assuming the humans were running around in panic, Daeho's team had been executing a plan that seemed impossible. The mining operation had been running for 3 years, which meant 3 years of digging tunnels, reinforcing underground chambers, and building a network of passages that stretched for miles beneath the surface. What looked like a simple mining facility from above was actually the tip of an iceberg. The real base was underground. It's protected by hundreds of feet of solid rock. Park So-young had moved her medical equipment into a natural cave system they'd discovered during their first year. The walls were lined with crystalline formations that actually helped deflect energy signatures, making it nearly impossible for the Vortani sensors to detect life signs. Choi Woo-bin had spent those crucial 6 hours rigging every piece of equipment on the surface with remote detonators, not to fight the aliens, but to make it look like the bombardment had destroyed everything. When the plasma bolts hit, secondary explosions from fuel tanks and mining charges created a spectacular light show that convinced the Vortani they'd obliterated the entire facility. The cafeteria where Kim Hae-jin used to serve her, surprisingly good meals, was now a smoking crater. The communications tower that Lee Min-ho had maintained so carefully was twisted metal. The workshop where Sergeant Yoon Tae-young had taught civilians basic weapon maintenance was gone completely. But underneath it all, 59 humans sat in reinforced bunkers, very much alive and very angry. Admiral Zickmer studied the sensor readings from his flagship. The bombardment had been textbook perfect. Every structure destroyed, no return fire, no signs of organized resistance. His thermal scanners showed some heat signatures underground, but that was expected. A few survivors hiding in basements or storage areas, probably injured and terrified. "Excellent work," he told his weapons officer. "Deploy the ground forces. Standard cleanup protocol." The Vortani had done this dance dozens of times before. Bombard from orbit, then send in troops to eliminate any survivors and secure valuable resources. It was efficient, brutal, and had never failed. 3 dropships descended through the planet's thin atmosphere, carrying 60 of the Empire's best soldiers. These weren't regular troops. They were the Vortani equivalent of special forces, equipped with energy shields, plasma rifles, and armor that could stop most known weapons. As the dropships landed in the smoking ruins of the mining facility, Admiral Zickmer was already planning his victory report. Another successful conquest for the Empire. another species that had learned not to defy Vortani's superiority. He had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. The first Vortani's soldier to enter the main tunnel entrance never saw what hit him. One moment he was scanning the darkness with his helmet's night vision. The next moment a mining charge exploded directly beneath his feet. The blast echoed through the underground complex like thunder, and Park Ji-woo smiled grimly from his hidden position. "Welcome to our home," he whispered into his communicator. Park Ji-woo had been the only real soldier among the mining crew when they'd first arrived on Kepler-4 for to see. 10 years of Special Forces training, 3 tours of duty on hostile worlds, and a chest full of medals he never talked about. He'd taken the mining job to get away from war, but war had found him anyway. The Vortani soldiers were designed for open battlefield combat. Their energy shields could deflect plasma bolts, their armor could stop projectiles, and their weapons could cut through solid steel. But none of that helped them in the narrow tunnels where they could only move single file. Contact front. One of the aliens shouted in his clicking language as another mining charge detonated. The explosion brought down a section of tunnel ceiling, trapping half the squad behind a wall of rubble. Kim Hae-jin crouched in a side passage, her hands shaking as she held the detonator. She'd gone from growing vegetables to triggering explosives in the space of a few hours. "Goo, they're trying to flank through Tunnel 7, she reported. "Copy that. Lee Subin, you're up." 3 levels down, Lee Subin activated her latest creation. She'd taken a mining robot designed for boring through rock and attached every welding torch they had to its front end. The machine rolled through the tunnel like a mechanical dragon, spitting superheated plasma in all directions. The Vortani soldiers' energy shields were useless against industrial welding equipment. Their advanced armor melted like butter under temperatures designed to cut through solid metal. The aliens retreated, firing desperately at a machine that had been built to survive cave-ins and rockfalls. "This is impossible," the Vortani squad leader reported back to his ship. "These tunnels are a maze. Every corner has a trap. They're using construction equipment as weapons." Admiral Zickmer received the report with growing frustration. His elite troops were being held up by miners and farmers. It was embarrassing. How many casualties? 18 dead, 12 wounded. The humans have lost maybe 3 or 4. The numbers didn't make sense. The Vortani had superior technology, better training, and overwhelming firepower. But they were fighting in an environment the humans had designed specifically to neutralize those advantages. Choi Woo-bin had rigged the tunnel system with backup power, emergency lighting, and communication lines that let the defenders coordinate their attacks. Park So-young had set up first aid stations in hidden chambers, keeping the human fighters in the battle even when they got hurt. Every piece of mining equipment became a weapon. Excavation charges became bombs, or carts became mobile shields. Even the ventilation system had been turned into a weapon, pumping smoke and gas into areas where the Vortani were trying to advance. The aliens were learning a hard lesson about fighting humans on their own turf. Superior technology meant nothing when your enemy refused to fight fair. Kim Daeho's fingers moved across the alien control panel with practiced ease. 6 months ago, a Vortani scout ship had crashed on the far side of the planet during a routine patrol. The crew hadn't survived, but their communication equipment had been salvaged and quietly studied by the mining team's engineers. "Are you sure this thing works?" whispered Lee Min-ho, watching nervously as Daeho activated the device. "Only one way to find out," Daeho replied. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly they could hear every word the Vortani soldiers were saying to each other. "Squad 2, advance through the eastern tunnel. Squad 3, hold position at Junction 7, came the voice of the Vortani. Commander, his clicking language automatically translated by the salvaged equipment. Daeho grinned and switched to his own communication channel. "Park Ji-woo, they're sending a squad through the eastern tunnel. Set up an ambush at the first bend." "Copy that, Commander." "How did you know?" "Let's just say we're getting some inside information." The psychological effect was immediate. The Vortani soldiers began to panic as the humans seemed to predict their every move. Every time they planned a flanking maneuver, the defenders were already waiting. Every time they tried to coordinate a group attack, explosives would detonate in exactly the right places to disrupt their formation. But Daeho's second surprise was even more devastating. Deep in the mining complex, Lee Su-ben had been working on her own project. The facility had dozens of mining robots, each one built like a small tank and designed to operate in the harshest conditions. She'd spent the last few hours reprogramming them with a very different set of instructions. "Su-ben, how's our mechanical friends coming along?" Daeho asked. "Ready to party, Commander? Sending them up now?" The first mining robot emerged from an abandoned shaft behind the main Vortani position. It looked like a metal beetle the size of a small car, with drilling equipment mounted on its front and tracks that could climb over almost any terrain. The Vortani soldiers turned in surprise as it rolled toward them, but their plasma rifles barely scratched its reinforced hull. Then the robot opened fire with its modified cutting laser. The Vortani had never faced an enemy that used industrial equipment as weapons of war. Their tactics were designed for fighting other armies, not construction machines that had been turned into improvised tanks. The robots moved with mechanical precision, their drilling arms spinning as they advanced on the confused aliens. "What are these things?" screamed a Vortani soldier into his communicator. "Mining robots," Su-ben replied cheerfully, though of course the alien couldn't hear her. "Tough little guys. They're built to work in conditions that would kill most organic life forms." Within minutes, 6 more robots had emerged from different tunnels. They moved in perfect coordination, surrounding the Vortani positions and attacking from multiple angles. The aliens' advanced armor was designed to stop energy weapons, not industrial drilling equipment spinning at thousands of rotations per minute. The hunters were becoming the hunted. And the Vortani were learning that humans had a talent for turning everyday tools into instruments of war. Admiral Ziekmer stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His forces had been on the planet for 12 hours, and instead of a quick victory, he was looking at a nightmare. Red dots marked the positions of his dead soldiers, scattered across the mining complex like fallen leaves. "Sir, we've lost contact with Squad 7, reported his communications officer. "That's the 4th squad today," Ziekmer growled. "What happened to them?" "Unknown, sir. Their life signs just ... disappeared." What the Admiral didn't know was that Park Ji-woo had been busy during the night. The former Special Forces operator had taken 3 volunteers and crept through the tunnel system to where the Vortani had set up their forward command post. The aliens never saw them coming. Their night vision is terrible, Ji-woo whispered to Kim Hae-jin as they dragged captured Vortani weapons back to their base, and their hearing is even worse. They rely too much on their fancy equipment. The humans had discovered something remarkable about Vortani technology. It was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly user-friendly. The weapons seemed to automatically adjust to whoever was holding them. Within an hour, the mining crew was using alien plasma rifles like they'd been trained on them for years. Point and shoot. The gun does all the thinking. But the real breakthrough came from Dr. Choi Yuna in her makeshift laboratory. The xenobiologist had been studying the dead Vortani soldiers, and what she'd found was fascinating. Their entire species evolved on a world with very stable conditions, she explained to Commander Daeho. No extreme temperatures, no seasonal changes, no natural disasters. They're incredibly specialized, but that specialization is also their weakness. Pointed to her analysis on a portable screen, "Look at this. Their respiratory system can't handle sudden pressure changes. Their skin is sensitive to specific frequencies of light. And their nervous system shuts down if their core body temperature drops by just a few degrees." "How do we use that?" Ho asked. "Well, we've got mining equipment that can create pressure waves, floodlights that can be modified to emit specific frequencies, and a ventilation system that can pump cold air anywhere in the complex." The next night, the humans launched their first coordinated counterattack. Using stolen Vortani equipment and their new knowledge of alien physiology, they turned the tables completely. Sergeant Yoon Tae-young led a team through the upper tunnels, using modified mining lights to disorient the Vortani soldiers. The aliens stumbled around like they were drunk, their nervous systems overwhelmed by the specific light frequency that system to create pressure waves that made the aliens feel like they were drowning on dry land. Their respiratory systems perfectly adapted to their homeworld's stable atmosphere, couldn't cope with the sudden changes by dawn. The humans had captured 2 more Vortani positions and taken enough equipment to arm their entire civilian population. The miners were becoming soldiers, and the soldiers were becoming ghosts in the tunnels. Admiral L. Zekmer was beginning to understand that he hadn't invaded a mining. As his forces, in 2 days, he'd lost over half his ground troops to a bunch of miners and farmers. His career was hanging by a thread, and the High Command would demand answers he didn't have. Prepare the orbital bombardment cannons, he ordered his weapons. Officer, the experimental ones.
Sir.
Those weapons are still in testing phase. We don't know what the side effects might be. I don't care about side effects. Zekmer slammed his fist on the command console. These humans have made fools of us. I want every tunnel, every cave, every hiding spot turned to glass. The experimental plasma cannons were the Vortani Empire's latest weapon technology. Unlike regular plasma bolts that exploded on contact, these weapons could bore through solid rock for miles. Following heat signatures and life signs like hunting dogs, they were designed to eliminate enemies who tried to hide underground. But down in the mining complex, Li Su-ben had been working on something that would have impressed the galaxy's best engineers. She'd noticed something peculiar about the planets. Mineral composition during their 3 years of mining operations. Commander, remember how our equipment kept malfunctioning during electrical storms? She asked Kim Dae-ho as they stood in the deepest part of the mine. Yeah, we lost half our computers during that big storm last year. That's because this planet's crust is loaded with something special. These minerals create a natural electromagnetic field when they're exposed to high energy. The walls were lined with refined minerals extracted from the deepest parts of the mine. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting the mineral deposits to the mining facility's power grid. What am I looking at? Dae-ho asked. Pulse generator ever built. When I trigger this, it'll send a wave of energy through the entire planet's crust. Every electronic device within 1,000 miles will be fried, including our equipment, including everything. But here's the thing. We can survive without our computers. Can the Vortani? Dae-ho understood immediately. The aliens relied on their technology for everything, life support, weapons, communication, even basic navigation. Take away their electronics and they'd be helpless. How long do we have? Their ships are charging those new weapons now. I'd say maybe an hour before they start firing. The humans spent that hour preparing for the most desperate gamble in military history. They gathered food, water, and basic medical supplies in the deepest chambers. They prepared backup communication systems using old-fashioned radio equipment that might survive the electromagnetic pulse. Dr. Choi Yuna helped prepare simple weapons, knives, clubs, anything that didn't require electronics. We're going back to the Stone Age, she muttered, but at least we know how to survive in the Stone Age. Above them, Admiral Zekmer was positioning his ships for the final bombardment. His experimental weapons were locked onto the human positions, ready to turn the entire mining complex into molten slag. Fire when ready, he ordered. At that exact moment, Li Su-ben pressed the activation switch on her improvised weapon. Planet's entire mineral crust became a massive antenna, broadcasting electromagnetic death into space. The electromagnetic pulse hit like an invisible tsunami, rolling across the planet's surface and reaching into space with fingers of pure energy. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zekmer watched in horror as every screen went dark. Every light died, and every system that had kept his ship alive for decades simply stopped working. Emergency power. In the sudden silence, the bridge crew fumbled in the darkness, their hands searching for controls that no longer responded. In the mining complex below, Li Su-ben felt the pulse wash over them like a physical force. The lights flickered once and died, plunging them into absolute darkness. But she was ready for this. They all were. Solar-powered LED lights flickered to life throughout the tunnels. Hand-crank radios crackled as the teams checked in with each other, protected them from the electromagnetic wave. But the real surprise was what the EMP had done to the planet itself. The massive energy discharge had interacted with the unique mineral deposits in ways that Li Su-ben had hoped for but never been certain about. Commander Park Ji-woo reported over the radio, "I'm seeing movement on the surface. Looks like some of the Vortani ships are trying to land. Emergency landings, Deho confirmed. Without their computers, they can't control their ships properly. Some of them are probably crashing. The Vortani had built their entire civilization around advanced technology. Their ships didn't have manual controls because they'd never needed them. The surviving aliens were stumbling across the planet's surface like lost children. Their sleek armor had become metal coffins without power. Their energy weapons were useless chunks of plastic and metal. Some died from exposure when their environmental suits failed. Others suffocated when their breathing apparatus stopped working. Kim Hyjin watched a group of Vortani soldiers through binoculars from a hidden observation post. They were wandering in circles, clearly lost and confused. Their pale, thin bodies were never meant to survive in natural conditions. They look like they've never seen sunlight before, she reported to Deho. And they're moving like they can't figure out how to walk without their computers telling them where to put their feet. The humans, meanwhile, had spent 3 years learning to survive on this harsh world. They knew where to find water, which plants were safe to eat, how to navigate by the stars, and how to build shelter from the planet's frequent sandstorms. It was becoming clear that the Vortani Empire had sent a fleet to conquer a mining colony. But instead, they delivered themselves into a trap that would become their tomb. The cleanup took 3 weeks. But Kim Dae-ho was a thorough man, and he wasn't about to let any Vortani escape to bring back reinforcements. The electromagnetic pulse had done most of the work for them. Without their technology, the aliens were like fish out of water. Others had lasted a few days, stumbling around the planet's surface before collapsing from dehydration or exposure. Found another group near the northern ridge, Park Ji-woo reported over the radio. 5 of them holed up in a crashed dropship. They're in bad shape. Any weapons? Nothing that works. They're using rocks and metal scraps. It's like they've been trying to eat the local plant life. Dr. Choi Yuna had warned them about that. The planet's vegetation was toxic to Vortani physiology. Their species had evolved on a world with very different chemistry, and their digestive systems couldn't handle the local food chain. The humans moved methodically across the planet's surface, tracking down every survivor. These aliens had come to wipe out the mining colony, and if even one escaped, they'd bring back a fleet that would turn the planet into radioactive dust. Subin had salvaged enough Vortani equipment, too. Equip a small army. Their weapons, once powered by the mining facility's generators, were incredibly effective. Their armor, modified to work with human physiology, provided excellent protection. Even their communication devices, once they figured out how to bypass the fried circuits, gave them perfect coordination across the planet. It's like they designed this stuff for us. Choi Woo-bin marveled as he fitted a Vortani energy shield. Their technology is so user-friendly, even I can figure it out. The irony wasn't lost on Dae-ho. The Vortani had brought the tools of their own destruction. Their overconfidence in their technology had made them vulnerable, and their assumption that primitive humans couldn't adapt had sealed their fate. Admiral Zikmer was among the last to die. They found him in his crashed flagship, trying to repair a communication array with his bare hands. The proud alien who had expected an easy victory had spent his final days, desperately trying to warn his empire about what had happened. "Sir." "No," Dae-ho replied firmly. "Let them wonder what happened. Maybe they'll think twice before attacking another human colony." 6 months later, Earth received a simple message from the Kepler-44 to see. Mining operation, status report, all objectives completed. Mining operations continuing at 120% capacity. No assistance required. The message didn't mention the 30 Vortani warships that now sat silent in orbit. Their crews dead, and their technology integrated into the mining facility's defenses. Empire never sent another ship to investigate. They simply marked that sector of space as unknown hazard and moved on to easier targets.